Welcome to Career and Leadership Real Talk, the no-nonsense guide for ambitious managers who want to have more impact and progress their career. I'm Pamela Langan, a job search coach and expert CV writer specialising in helping frustrated professionals land the jobs and pay rises they know they deserve.
And I'm Jackie Jagger, a leadership and mindset coach specialising in helping newly promoted and new to role leaders to avoid the dickhead trap and lead with confidence. Between us, we've helped hundreds of leaders and managers to find new roles, take ownership of their careers, and handle the challenges that job searches and leadership responsibility inevitably bring. And now we're joining forces to share with you what we know has worked for our clients.
Hello and welcome to this week's episode. Today, we are talking about how to spot if your team are not fully engaged. And we know that this comes up in quite a few different scenarios. It could be because you've taken over a new team. It could be because your team have become demotivated over a period of time. So what are the main warning signs that we should be looking for?
I think, funnily enough, the main warning sign is actually seeing several smaller warning signs. So if you just see one warning sign, that's probably not a huge red flag. But if you see several different of these examples at a lower level, I think that's where it can be signs that there's stuff going on under the surface that you need to get to the bottom of. And I think what's also helpful to say is that this stuff is probably easier to notice if you start a new role or take over a new team. You can spot this stuff quite easily. But it can also be the case that over a period of time, some of these things can start to come into play and then they can be harder to spot. So as we go through them, I think it's quite useful to consider, are these things the same as they used to be, or maybe are there a bit more of this happening now than there used to be in my team? So the first sign is caution or silence or selective participation when you have meetings. So meetings are a great chance to get engagement from your team, to involve people, to have discussions, have conversations. And if you're seeing that either individuals struggle to participate, so some people do participate and some people don't, then that can be a sign that the team's not fully engaged. And the other sign could be that everybody or pretty much everybody fully participates in some things, but then there are some topics or some situations where people go quiet. That can be a sign as well. So it might be that they're fine with kind of safe operational discussions, but then if there's a more challenging topic, that's when people go quiet. And those things can be a sign that either individuals on the team have learned from bitter experience that either speaking up makes no difference or it comes with negative consequences, or that the team collectively has recognized that there are some topics that maybe don't feel as safe to engage in discussion around.
Yeah, it's interesting, isn't it? How you can start really noticing those things in your meeting. What else would you spot if your team were in this situation?
The second one I would say is apathy in decision making. This can sometimes look like things seem to be in agreement, where there's a surface level agreement and it might feel like people are all in favour. But it can also be where people aren't necessarily in agreement. They just feel like the easier thing is to say that they're in agreement. And then there's all of those chats outside of the room separately, and people are having those conversations and voicing their thoughts elsewhere on side chats, on Teams messages when they're going for lunch. So it can feel like there's commitment to decisions, but then you might not see the actions followed up, and there might be stuff happening outside of the room for those.
Yeah, that's an interesting one, isn't it? And I think that's probably one that might be a little bit more difficult to see if people are having conversations outside of the room. What else is there to be aware of?
Another sign, I think this one is clearer, and again, is probably something that people will see more so when they take over a team. And this is problem-focused discussions. So what I mean by this is not necessarily things that are outwardly completely negative, but where there's more time spent in more of that problem identification rather than a natural flow to shift to solution mode. So teams that are demotivated or that feel like their thoughts are not valued will often get into that negative mindset. And so what they will see is more problems, more of the challenges. We can't do that because, and that can then become, I can evidence this, so therefore I can say it. So it can be a bit of a way of venting frustrations when there is that opportunity for discussion.
Yeah, that's an interesting one, isn't it? Because some of them things where it looks like it's people are resisting change or different things actually can be a real clear sign, can't it, that they're just lacking some engagement. So what else then do you think?
So we've also got self-censoring at key moments. So this is where a conversation might build momentum and it feels productive, but then there might be certain points where things then pull back, or where, again, individuals might raise an issue, but then not want to follow that up. They might start to share a concern, but then you can almost see them think, oh, I don't want to be the one to put my head above the parapet. So those things can be a sign that they are worried that you or somebody is going to shoot the messenger, where they don't want to be the bearer of bad tidings, where they feel like it's not acceptable to be the one to state a problem or state a challenge or an obstacle. So they almost half go there and then pull back.
Yeah, and I think when that happens and you're more aware of it, you do really notice that, don't you, as well? Because you're like, no, go on. What were you going to say, or what are your thoughts? And it's no, it's okay, and that's where then you can explore it a little bit more, can't you? So, what is the final thing then that you would say would be one of the top warning signs?
So the final one, and I think this is particularly challenging if you are in a situation where you've got a mostly hybrid or remote team, because this is increasing isolation. So this is where there's not as much collaboration either within the team or cross department on cross functional projects that you would necessarily want. And that can be because those interactions feel like hard work. So people just feel like, I'll get my head down, I'll do what I need to do, but they're not actively looking for those opportunities to collaborate or to work more broadly. And those types of scenarios, again, are often a little bit sneakier. You might find it harder to recognize, because if everybody mostly does a lot of their work remotely, if you're not in the office all the time, you might take a while to spot some of that pattern. But I think that one is a real key one. And I see that quite a lot, where people start to think about, actually, yes, there's individuals that kind of withdraw, that don't engage, don't look at stakeholder engagement as a priority. So yeah, I feel like that one's pretty widespread, but quite hard to spot.
Yeah, and I suppose overall, if you start looking at those things overall, they probably do all link in together, don't they? You probably haven't got one without one or two of the others. So I suppose once you put that real focus on looking at how the team's working, it's probably quite easy to spot that maybe there is an issue, or there's definitely like a lack of engagement in some parts of that. So in terms of understanding then what's really going on underneath all of this, like where would you suggest people start in trying to first of all spot those warning signs, but then once they spot them, it's like, what now?
Yeah. So I think in terms of spotting them, it's being honest with yourself. It's asking yourself, like I say, that question: if this is the same team that I've been looking after for a while, what was happening that is no longer happening, or what wasn't happening that is happening, and spotting the difference of how things have shifted. And early intervention, if you're having a team that is starting to dip in engagement, the sooner that you can notice those signs, the sooner then you can start to address it, the better. If you go into a team, either take over with a restructure or start a new role, it's often easier to see, but harder to know what the root causes might be. So I think in either case, it's really about getting to the bottom of what's causing it before you try and address it. So what I often see with this is people will try and put solutions in place without actually getting to the bottom of what's causing it. And I think when you take that time to really get curious and try and understand what's prompting this, why is this happening? Why is it happening now? What's changed? What else has changed that might have prompted this change? Then you can start to understand and identify. And solving team engagement is in itself a team sport. So this is not just on you as a manager or leader. If you've got a team that is not fully engaged, then I think it's about really starting to explore with your team what are some of the defining factors here.
Yeah, I think in terms of spotting the warning signs and everything, as a leader, I do really believe that is your job to spot where it's going wrong or where it doesn't feel right. But I don't think it's your responsibility to try and fix everything and come up with all of the solutions. So I think as a leader, it's up to you to go, yeah, something is not feeling right, something's off. It could just be that it's one person, it could be the whole team, it could just be like one or two people. So it is up to you to go, okay, what is happening and what do we need to do? So I suppose there's probably some questions that we could ask to get the ball rolling with this. So what would be your top questions to start exploring what is going on and what can we do about it?
So there's a number of questions, and I think the key to this is ask questions that you're genuinely interested to get the answer to. But some of the ones that have been really useful for clients have been things like, what do you think's going on here? So you can use your judgment. Sometimes you might speak to individuals about, I get this sense that this is happening. I feel like not everybody's fully engaged. Sometimes you might bring that to the table as a group discussion, depends on the scenario. But I think some of the questions that you can then use are things like, what's changed? What do we think is the reason that this has come about? What's been tried before? What gets in the way of us as a team making improvements? What are some of the blockages or challenges or obstacles that mean that people don't fully engage with proposing solutions? It could be what makes the biggest difference. Any of those types of questions that really give you that opportunity to explore what is really going on for people, what else can they share that can help me to understand how they're feeling, why they're feeling it. And then I think what's also really important is to be prepared to listen, because if what you're then going to do is defend when they give you an answer and you defend, you can compound the issue. So if you're going to ask those questions, you've got to do it in that spirit of curiosity. Really ask, really seek to understand, rather than do it and then give responses, immediate responses to them.
Yeah, and I think you've got to expect that listening to be difficult as well. Because if something's going wrong and you need to find out what that is, some of those answers can really cut close to the bone, can't they? Like when people do start cheering, and I think you've got to put yourself in that position where you're ready to listen. You don't need to respond, you just need to listen, take it all in, and then you can start coming up with some of the solutions or ways that you can help those people or improve those situations. But that is difficult, and it just took me back to one of those situations myself when I took over a new team and listening to all of their concerns. And sometimes people just want to get stuff off the chest, and it, as a leader, you sat there and you're coming into a new team and you want to bring all the energy and the excitement and everything, and people are just sitting there moaning. It's really hard because you feel like in some ways you take on that negativity. So I think it's almost like you almost need to put like a shield around yourself, and it's like these people can get it off the chest, they can get it all out, and once they've done that, gives you more information, because it's the information, like knowledge is power, isn't it, in this situation? When you find out what's going wrong with them or what's going on for them, it's so much easier then to come up with the solutions. In terms of doing this, sometimes people can just go all in, can't they? And turn everything inside out and upside down. And we've got an issue, we need to sort it. But what are some of the common mistakes that you've seen people make that our listeners could potentially avoid if they're going into these situations?
This is a fascinating question for me because immediately my brain is in a million directions of all the pitfalls that can come up. I think probably there's different things depending upon if, for example, you're taking over a new team, whether that's you're starting a new organization or you're um, gaining a team. One of the things that can be really important is to avoid either making quick promises or criticizing the previous leadership. I think those two pitfalls are really common because in those instances, it might feel easier to listen in the sense of their criticism is not directed at you, but you often don't have the full context. You're hearing their side of it, and you're not hearing necessarily what the other side of the story of what might have contributed to things. So it can be very tempting to either make a quick promise and be, oh, that's terrible. This is going to change now that I'm here. And you want that kind of positivity. But if you don't fully understand the root causes, or if you aren't in a situation to be able to deliver on those promises, then that can be really damaging. And likewise, if somebody that came before you has prompted some of this, it can be tempting to almost like side with the team, side with individuals. But actually, that creates a culture where it's acceptable to talk people down behind their back. And that, when you're going into a new team, is definitely not what you want, given that you're now the leader. So, yeah, I think those two are really common things that people try and do.
Yeah, it's interesting that as well, isn't it? Because you know yourself that that happens. Like when you take over team and you do those initial one-to-ones, there is an element of that, and you do feel in some ways compelled to say, "Yeah, I'm going to do it differently." But at that point, you don't know what the constraints are. You don't know actually if you can change all of these things, because it might be company policy or procedures or whatever that will stop you from doing that and restrict you from moving forward in some cases. Sometimes you can just go in and wave a magic wand, but most of the time there's a little bit more to it, isn't there? So is there anything else that people should think about not doing in those conversations?
So I think just to reiterate what we spoke about earlier, in the sense of that when it's your job to spot the issue, it's not always just your job to solve the issue. And what I talk about is solving problems with people, not for them. So you're a leader, you're not people's parent. So that team needs to be a part of creating the solution for a number of reasons. They will have insights and perspectives that you don't have. And also because when you involve people in the solution, they're much more likely to be bought into making it work. If you're trying to impose your solution, even if it's something that has worked really well elsewhere, you run the risk of either them becoming reliant on you solving things for them, or them not fully buying in because that's your solution and not a solution that they feel engaged with.
Yeah, so I think, and that makes perfect sense, doesn't it? Because if you try and do that and you just rush in, then it never really goes to plan. It's always best, isn't it, to get all the facts, get all the information, and really make it considered decision or choices as to what happens next. So, where can people start then if they find that they're in this situation? What are they going to do to get moving with all of this?
So there's a really simple approach that I really like that you can do with the team as a whole. And that's to run a what's working well, stroke, even better if session. So this is about gathering the team's perspective and the team's insight. And it's a structured way to look at how can we improve things that avoids what's good and what's bad at the moment, avoids some of that polarization. So getting the team to share what is working well right now, what do they want to keep, what do they want to build on, And then you can look at what would work even better if there were some changes. So it's not what's wrong, it's what would make it even better to be a part of this team. What would give us some even better ways of working? What would make it an even better place for you to come to work? Sometimes that will unearth is things that have worked well in the past, but have dropped away. You might have individuals that have worked in other organizations that bring suggestions for how things can come. You'll find that really simple but straightforward approach can often yield a lot of that sense of agency as being a part of creating the solution, and can start to really move forward rather than be stuck in why have we got this problem, what's causing it. You're moving people forward into how do we solve it.
Yeah, I really like that way because it just feels like an easier way to tackle it, doesn't it? What else can you do then? Because I know one thing that is like what you're told and what's ingrained into you as a leader is to get to know people properly. But sometimes that can feel really quite personal because if you're asking them about their personal lives and all of this kind of stuff, and you do almost want to maintain that professional relationship, you don't really want to get into the personal aspects of their lives. But I suppose if you want to get to know somebody properly, that's the first go-to, isn't it? Understand their personal lives and then you'll understand them. But do you really need to do that?
This is a really interesting one. And I think, particularly when you're new, it can be that sense of, I don't know what people are expecting of me. I don't know how much to ask about their personal life. And I would say, let that evolve. Don't, if you feel like you could be prying, then don't ask it. But you do need to make an effort to understand what makes people tick. And that can be about what's their career story, what motivates them at work, what do they want from their career. Simple questions that are in a work context that people might not open up to immediately, but you're not asking them to tell you what do they spend their time doing outside of work, or what's their family situation, or those kinds of things can feel quite forced and can feel tricky if people aren't ready. Whereas those things of what motivates you at work, what are the things that are your own personal aspirations, what are the blockers, where have you been before this, what other roles have you done, what skills have you got, that's showing genuine interest in a work context. So I think as long as you keep it in that type of context, it doesn't tend to feel like it's prying. It tends to feel more, oh, this is someone who's actually genuinely interested in me, in what I bring to the team, in how I can be at my best at work. This seems to be someone that's potentially got my back and who is a good person to have in my corner. So I think that's how you can often distinguish those things.
Yeah, and those questions are great for relationship building generally as well, aren't they? It's not just about getting to know your team. You can use that in all different settings, whether it's like networking or dealing with stakeholders or whatever it is. So I think they're really good questions to have up your sleeve so that you're ready to ask them, and they're like your go-to questions then, aren't they? So you don't have to pry into people's personal lives, but you can still really get under the skin of what makes them tick. So I really like them. So what else can you do then?
The other thing that I often suggest to people, and we've done an episode on this before, is using the effort impact matrix. This is getting people to think about what tasks or actions or projects are they engaged with that have high or low degree of impact when they're done, and are high or low degree of effort in order to make those things happen. And what that can do is get people to really think about, where do they make a contribution? How does their contribution fit within the team's overall contribution? What drains them? What energizes them? Are they working to their strengths, or are people doing things that maybe are part of their role, but the reason that they're less engaged than they used to be is because they're just doing stuff that is their day-to-day role is in itself draining? So it can highlight tasks that people might then say, well, that doesn't really have much value, because those, if you're asking people to put a lot of effort into things that don't have much of an impact once they're done, big reports that go to the board and nobody reads them, those kinds of things can get unearthed from looking at this. And it's then giving you that opportunity to have that feeling of, right, what is it that people are engaging with? What are they spending their time doing? What impact is it having? So that you can start to think as that team leader, how can we have the maximum impact and ensure that people are doing things that does energize them, that does play to their strengths, that does map to the organizational objectives, so that it gets noticed by other people once it's done.
Yeah, and I absolutely love the effort impact matrix. This is a complete game changer for me. When me and Jackie started working together a few years ago, this is one of the first things, wasn't it, that we talked about? And I was like, that is so interesting. Why have I never heard of this before? And between the two of us, there's probably not a framework or a model that we've not covered or looked at. But it was such an eye opener for me. And I actually use it now on a regular basis because it just makes life so much easier. So would definitely recommend going over to Jackie's website and having a little look at it, because it is honestly a game changer, especially using it for yourself and then showing your teams how to use it for themselves, just to make life easier for everyone and making sure that you're getting the most, or you're making the most impact in with everything that you do. So Jackie, what are your final thoughts then on spotting the warning signs and then doing something about it when your team's lacking engagement?
So I think the key things I will pick out from what we've talked about are the importance that it's your responsibility to spot it, but that doesn't necessarily mean that it's just you that's got to solve it. And I think the other thing I would say is about patience and being willing to really understand what's going on below the surface and have that kind of patience and consistency to start to resolve it. I think people often feel like, oh, this is a terrible thing, my team's not engaged and I've got to turn this around really quickly. But this is about building that sense back up, and that is not going to be an overnight thing. So if it's the case in your team, it's not the end of the world. There's things that you can do to start to address it, and just start to take those actions, start to build that back and go from there.
Amazing. I've actually really loved talking through this today, because it is something that I know comes up for so many people, and especially if you're new to a leadership role, or maybe you have got a demotivated team and you've been thinking, I really need to start thinking about what to do with this team. So hopefully there's something that you've been able to take away from this episode. And as usual, please do share it with anyone that you think might need to hear what we're talking about. And don't forget to rate and review us on your favorite podcast platforms, and get in touch. Like, we absolutely love hearing from you. We love to know when you've listened to the podcast, what you found useful, and also if there's any topics that you would like us to cover. So we'll be back next week with another episode.
Exciting news from us. If you're an ambitious leader or manager earning 50k or more and you're ready to take your career to the next level, we have an opportunity for you. Introducing Catalyst Career Club, your secret weapon for unlocking career success. As a member, you'll get access to monthly live training sessions, exclusive job opportunities, and the ability to get personalised advice from us on your toughest career challenges.
We've helped thousands of driven leaders like you secure significant pay rises, land dream roles, and thrive in their careers. And now we want to support you in achieving your most ambitious career goals too. Membership is just $6.99 per month with no contract or tie-in. And as a special bonus for being our podcast listeners, you can use the code podcast at checkout to get your first month for just £1. Head over to pamelalangan.com/Catalyst Career Club to sign up now, and we'll see you inside.